I'm Navot Akiva.
הבטחתי לך.
תודה רבה. I'm Navot Akiva. I lead NLU in live person, and the work you're going to see here today is the work on behalf of the Israeli and the US teams of the data science teams in live person. So we're going to talk about data-driven conversational AI, and let's start with the motivation on our end, on my end. So, as I said, I work for LivePerson, and for those who not familiar with LivePerson, we've been here for 25 years. LivePerson provides a platform for consumers and brands to interact textually, to discuss textually between them, to communicate. Consumers like us approach brands with requests, and human agent on the other side, from the brand side, handle their request, all in messaging and chat textual channels. We've been doing that for 25 years, and we serve about 18,000 customers, tens of millions conversations a month, so we have tons of data. We utilize this kind of data to optimize aspects regarding our brand's efficiency and optimize their operations, and of course, while maintaining consumer satisfaction. This is our motivation for data-driven conversational AI, but before we talk about data-driven, let's talk what conversational AI is. So conversational AI is about automating the communication between, for us, between individuals, customers, and brands, and while maintaining satisfaction on our end, and on the other end, scaling for the brands, so we can serve a larger amount of consumers with less resources. More practically, conversational AI involves a couple of basic elements. One is understanding consumer intents. A consumer writes to you what he wants, you need to understand that. That's the basic element, the basic gateway for conversational AI automation. And the second one is automation of business use cases using bots. Conversation automation using bots, we're going to talk about them. So today's agenda is going to be like this. We're going to briefly mention what consumer intents are for those who are not really familiar with that. And we immediately going to talk about their challenges. So even though it's kind of a well-trained, well-addressed task, still we have many challenges in this area. And immediately I'm going to turn to bots or automation of conversations with humans using intents. But the mechanism for automation is bots. And I'm going to talk about their challenges, their open challenges that we're still facing, and the industry faces a lot of challenges with bots. It's we made a lot of progress, but still we have a lot of challenges. So intents and their challenges, bots and their challenges, and then I'm going to get to data-driven conversational AI, what a company that has data, like LivePerson, but any other company as well, can utilize this data and data-driven approaches to derive tools and meet those challenges. Okay, so let's start immediately with intents. Just to cover people that maybe not really familiar with intents, intents are when a consumer approaches us and wants to either get some information or request some kind of an action from a brand. Why are we interested in intent detection of these intents? Because we want to know what the consumer wants, of course, but we also want to act on it. So we want to act accordingly to what he wants from us, right? To satisfy his needs and to evaluate ourselves, how well did we do that? And there are various services today, options for doing that. LivePerson, but other open services, all the major companies are in the field. And let's talk about the challenges we're still facing. Even though it's got a well-addressed task, we're still facing some challenges. Briefly, I'll go briefly through them, and let's see what's left. So for starters, non-intentful messages. Non-intentful messages. Consumer messages, only between 30 to 40% of consumer messages in conversation actually contains an intent, meaning that the majority doesn't have any intent. If you take all your consumer messages of each conversation and send them to intent detection, whatever the one you trained, so for one, you're not efficient, and second, you're prone to false positive and might hurt your accuracy. That's one of the challenges still remaining nowadays in the intent detection field. Another one is multiple phrasing per intent. So when you train an intent, you take a bunch of text that you know that express this intent of the consumer. You train the intent detector on it. Still, there are other ways of phrasing or pronouncing the same intent. None of us could actually predict what are all the variations and options to pronounce the same intent up front. Kind of a coverage or recall challenge. For instance, I need to replace my credit card. That's one way of pronouncing replace card intent, but also my current card is worn. Could we guess all the variations? We can't. That's a challenge. Another one is undiscovered or new emerging intents in the same sense of the previous one. Okay, there are other intents out there that consumer actually come with requests. The one we trained on, we know. What about all the others? We don't really know them. We can foresee them. And of course, even if we did, the new ones always will, at some point, come new ones. So it's a challenge that we need to try and address. Another one is multiple intents per message. The assumption that a consumer message contains a single intent doesn't really hold some of the times. Okay, some consumer messages actually contains more than one intent. So first you need to adjust your classifier for that. And even if you've done that, you need to adjust your KPIs accordingly. And last, not least, it's we're human. Consumers are human. There is various ways of pronouncing, but also typos and acronyms and slang and stuff like that. You've trained your intents on specific text. If there is a typo, you might want to realize that in the real world. How can you address that? So these are some of the challenges that we're facing. There is some kind of a commonality here that I want to state right now, which is known unknowns. Most of these are like things we know that we don't know. And we see later on in this presentation how data-driven approaches might get us closer to mitigate those gaps. Before I jump to data-driven solutions, we talk about intent or their challenges. Let's talk about bots and their challenges and present them as well. So you would like to address the consumer intent. You trained your intent detection. Right now, you want to use bots, and we're all using bots in this conversational AI domain, to automate business use case. A consumer wants to open a bank account. He wants to find out what he does when his screen of his phone is broken, and so on and so forth. So we'd like to create an automated conversation to interact with the customer and solve his problem. We do that using bots. What is the classical or traditional process of creating a bot? So an expert is using any of the bot platforms, and we have a lot. And he sits down, the expert, and train an intent and try to define what the flow gonna be. The consumer expressed the intent, asking about this, do that, and so on and so forth. Then there is the iterative process of improving this bot. So you create a bot, you release it, people use it, you detect failures, you fix it, you create a new version, release it, people use it, and so on and so forth. It's a costly iterative process, right, by nature, which we might want to maybe not to avoid, but actually handle that or ease the burden on the bot creator shoulders, not to mention business logic changes that happen every once in a while, seasonality, and things like that. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the bot challenges that we are facing today. First is cold start bootstrapping. I want to build bots. I don't have historical data. I'm new. I can start from all over, train my intent, build my bot, do all this iterative stuff. Can someone bootstrap this process for me? Make it more easy for me so I won't work too hard. Is it possible? That's one challenge. Second is, again, a human is creating a bot. Therefore, bot quality kind of bounded by this human ability to foresee what I was actually going to behave in reality, right? Can we provide me some additional information, some additional help when you create the bot? Third is bot types granularity, okay? We're familiar with open-ended bots, which are like chit-chat bots, like Google Mina. Daily discussion with bots, that's great. And the other one are goal-oriented bot, used for service, provide service or sales with a specific goal in mind. Actually, in LivePerson, we deal with the second one. Also, this presentation actually is about the second one. Still, goal-oriented bot, kind of a high-level definition of this family, right? If we don't know like the specifics behind that, below that, then we miss something. We miss actually understanding our data, understanding what we built, what we're optimizing for. And the last, and kind of most important, is bot performance and evaluation. Identifying what is going wrong with the bot, monitoring it, is kind of one of the challenges that the companies today facing, all the major players. It's kind of an important issue. So we talk about intent detection and various challenges. We talked about bots, or automating conversations, and the main challenges that we know today. Right now we arrive to the data-driven part. So let's go back a bit. I come from LivePerson, but other companies has data, conversational data. For instance, we have thousands of customers, millions of conversations daily. Agents are working daily, chatting, messaging with human agents and human consumers, of course, interacting between them, and the human agent actually solving those problems. We have this data, the conversational data, and we have also the bots data, the conversation with bots. Can we utilize this kind of conversational data, apply data-driven approaches, and derive some tools and capabilities to assist the bot builder or intent trainer, right? When he actually, and mitigate those challenges that we just described. So this is data-driven conversational AI. We want to use this abundance of conversational data. And in LivePerson, we have tons of millions of conversations a month. And we actually apply supervised method. Either we train it ourselves or use surveys, consumer surveys, agent surveys that provide some metadata. This is our labels. We use, of course, unsupervised approaches and utilize any kind of deep learning neural nets embedding the latest algorithm that you can think of. And there is a lot of progress in this field. So let's gradually talk about the challenges that we mentioned. I remind you, some of the challenges from the intent side and then on the bot side, and see what data-driven approach could provide solution for. I just want to mention, so some of those are implemented, some of those are in pipeline, some of those are ideas, but just take it as a potential of data and how we can actually help us overall meet those challenges. So we started with the non-intentful messages. Between 60 to 70% of the consumer messages doesn't have an intent. That's what you start from. So with LivePerson, we've created USIC. It's a universal statement of intent classifier. It's a classifier. We call it universal because it goes cross verticals. Actually works very well. And what it does, it's simple. When it gets a consumer message, it determines whether it carries an intent or not. As you can understand from the percentage I've reduced before, most of those consumer messages doesn't meet the criteria. They don't have an intent, so they're not being sent to the intent detection. We get more efficient, much more efficient, and also less prone for errors. We curate that from data. We have conversational data, we label it and create from it. What else could we do with data? So LivePerson has Live Intent. Live Intent is our platform for training intents, for tuning intents, tracking their volumes, tracking their KPIs, detecting errors, retraining, and so on and so forth. So you have moving data in the system. You use data for training, you use the monitoring here to monitor the quality, identify what's going wrong, what's emerging, what's not, and so on. Data-driven solution. Let's go further. We have data, we have intents, and we still, again, on the intents data-driven solutions. We can go unsupervised. So for instance, we can use any method of clustering and group together semantically similar intents or intent candidates. So what you see here in these groups, color groups here, are semantically similar intents messages, which being clustered together because they're similar to one another. All it requires from the bot builder or intent trainer in this context is to hover over a specific group, select, if it is an intent, select specific utterances, send it for training, and then you have an intent classifier if you haven't done it before. This way you could overcome the multiple phrasing per intent. So phrasing you're not aware of will be grouped because they're semantically similar. That was stripped from the data, you'll get it. You can see an undetected intent, so things you haven't seen before, you haven't trained before, and so on. And also, to some extent, multiple intents per message if they're wholly correlated. And last, for intents, we want to overcome typos in our vocabulary. We can use embeddings, which are based on characters or subwords, actually should overcome this challenge. Actually part of the mechanism for solutions. So these were like high-level description of what could be done for intents. Bots are much more complex. Let's go to bots and what data could contribute to bots. So we started with, I start from scratch. I don't have anything. Can someone please help me bootstrap this costly process for intents and also for bots? Well, yes. So for cold start bootstrapping, for instance, LivePerson provides its customers with intent starter packs, which means for your domain, there are frequent intents which are relevant to your domain. So we provide pre-trained intent detectors actually for your domain. You don't have to start from scratch. Take our starter pack, start using it, tuning it, and then we bootstrap your path towards, quite fast, towards coverage of your intent volume. That's one. Of course, one could think about pre-trained bots as well for like, you know, highly structured, recurring bots for domain, like you know, what's my balance or thing like that. It could be well defined, and we can pre-train it, and then anyone can start from this and bootstrap this process. Okay, what happens if I have conversation data? Yeah, for instance, if you're LivePerson or anyone else customer, and you have human agent already been addressing consumer intents for years, maybe you have tons of conversations of this intent being addressed by human agents, right? So can we again, the challenge, just to remind you, the challenge was that human expert building a bot, therefore the bot quality is bounded by the expert knowledge. What if we have data and would like to provide the bot builder with additional help, with additional information when he builds a bot? Okay, so of course one might think of analyzing this historical data. So for each intent that we consider automating, right? You have the agent, human agent actions, what he does, and you have the end results, whether it's satisfaction, what have you, and you can optimize this path or create an optimize this path if you'd like to guide your bot builder, and assume you're a bot builder. You say, okay, I would like to automate this consumer intent, and then the system would say, you know what? We have historical data. Here is a recommended path that if you do this and this and that in this order, actually it works well with human agents. Actually, kind of optimized path in a way, right? Could be automating dialog manager, but if you can also recommend some kind of an optimal path to your bot builder based on the human agents been doing that well for many conversations before. What about the bot type granularity? Moreover, the goal-oriented bot types. So when you have data, when people create bots, gradually you realize there are subtypes of bots. And it's important to know what the subtypes are, because when you create a new bot, you might want to guide yourself. Okay, I'm doing this kind of bot, that kind of bot, and then use the best practices that you know of to optimize your decisions or your process. Yeah, sorry about that. Go back, sorry. Okay, I don't see that animation here. Okay. So we see, for instance, from the left, routing bots. So you come with intent. Routing bot, its role is to route you to the right direction. Could be a human agent, could be another bot, and so on and so forth. We see bots of the type of filling forms. Just taking the information, instead of filling forms, it does it for you. FAQ bots. You ask for information, it already exists. And it kind of FAQ, and you've been served with a predefined answer to your question. Survey bots to measure satisfaction at the end of a conversation, and the upper one should be an end-to-end bot. Take your intent and handle the entire process, right, of handling your needs, asking for information, handling whatever you need, until the end, till satisfying your requests. Once you know what type of bots you're building, you can actually better understand what you're doing and optimize your results. The most important aspect, in my view, is tracking, monitoring, and improving bot performance. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park. I would say it's still studied. And I would like to give you a couple of components actually relate to that, and then what we do with them. So first is conversation success KPI, data-driven success KPIs. So we at LivePerson look at various KPIs. One of the interesting ones, I think, could be intent accuracy. How well do we actually get the consumer intent? Consumer satisfaction. How well do we satisfy the consumer? How well do they actually like what we did for him? And the one on the right is bot resolution. Did the bot actually get to resolve the issues regardless of the satisfaction? These are two measurements: satisfaction on the consumer side, resolution whether the bot actually achieved its goal. So data-driven success KPIs, conversation success KPIs are one element. Second one is identify bot failures. So when you have data, and you have data of filling bots, you can analyze what type of failures are more frequent than others, and train classifiers and detectors to detect those in consumer and bot conversations. For instance, whether a consumer is frustrated throughout the conversation. It's not the same as sentiment. Human agent and consumer sentiment is sometimes too often different than consumer frustration with bots. Another one is consumer escalation. He said, I don't want to talk to bot. I want a human agent. Okay, that's escalation. Third one might be abandonment. Your consumer just vanished in the middle of conversation. And another type of failure is bot being confused, asking you to rephrase or doesn't understand what you want from him and so on. And there are other types of bot failures. So if we know, if we have data-driven conversation KPIs on one hand, and bot failure types, and we detect them on the other hand, we can then come to a point where we can apply offline analysis over a bot conversation, identify the failures, see how well we did, aggregate the results, present them to the bot builder, then he knows exactly what to fix, and he can bootstrap the iterative process, which might be very costly. And even more so, we can utilize those detections for online preemptive diagnosis, meaning we train a model to predict when, for instance, a conversation might fail. And if we know that based on the indication that we already modeled, then we can preemptively act on it beforehand, maybe escalate to a human agent, overcome this issue, or fix whatever needed, and then increase consumer satisfaction and our performance. To sum up, okay, we've seen intent building challenges, even though it's a well-studied task. We've seen bot building challenges, which is still in process. And hopefully we've seen how a data-driven approach over massive data can create tools to meet those challenges. Thank you.